And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. This is our 79th episode, recorded on Tuesday, October 24th, 2023. I'm your host, Jeff Marlowe, joined here by my co-host, Kathy Amos. And tonight, we're joined by a special guest from Assembly Call, Andy Bottoms, the guru of girls coaching in Cincinnati. We will be taking a deeper look at Indiana's team and making some predictions. But as usual, we'll start this show with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And Kathy and Andy, I'll give you guys a chance to chime in here as well. But for me, my proud banner moment was Mackenzie Holmes being named to the AP preseason All-American team today. And I believe I read correctly, she is the first Hoosier to ever be named first team preseason All-American for in program history. So that's our banner moment, or my banner moment. And our banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, who includes the Assembly Call and Crimson Cast. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products for schools in their existing line. You're bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear. Now, not only do you get quality apparel, but you are supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelley School of Business. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23, that's HOME23, to get 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. And once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. And like I said, before I even hit our news headlines here, just Kathy and Andy, kind of thought your thoughts on the banner moment. If you maybe had something else you would have gone with.
Yeah, for me, that would have been the exact same banner moment. I definitely thought, it was historic, as you said, and well-deserved too. So, of course, only one person was unanimous on that voting. It wasn't Mackenzie, but it's still, I think she finished with maybe third in the voting is what I had seen on a tweet. I don't know if that's valid or not. I can't fact check them, but I just thought well-deserved for Mackenzie. A lot of expectations though. And, like we've talked about before with preseason, anything doesn't mean anything until we can show it on the hard court, but still a really fantastic achievement for Mackenzie and for the program to show how far, she's come as a freshman. If you've read that article that's out there, saying, her first exhibition game, she basically airballed a layup. She was so nervous. So you fast forward now 5 years and look at her being on the preseason All-American list. I think it's just a fantastic achievement to her hard work and to the coaching staff for helping her progress this far.
Yeah, definitely. I thought that was exciting news. I can't help but see something like that and still then go back to wonder, so first team All-American, but one media member didn't have her on the first team All Big Ten, but that's neither here nor there. But no, a great preseason honor for her. And I think it speaks to, the solid floor that the program has heading into the season with somebody like that in the fold. Obviously, Grace Berger, huge shoes to fill, but still having a first team All-American that you can lean on is going to help some of the, growing pains, whatever you want to call it, that they'll deal with and trying to figure out how life without Grace looks, but you've got a star to build around at center and lots of exciting things to look forward to with Mackenzie.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of those pieces to go around her as well tonight as we dig into the Hoosier roster and the schedule tonight with Andy. Well, let's hit some of the headlines here. Hoosier Hysteria was on the 20th. The team officially hung their Big Ten championship banner and received their rings from last year. Lene Beaumont teamed up with Anthony Leal to win the skills competition. Sarah Scalia teamed up with Gabe Cups to win the three-point contest. And Yarden Garzon won the knockout competition. Oh, and then, by the way, she hit 19 out of 25 threes in the three-point contest as well. So Mackenzie Holmes was also named to the preseason Lisa Leslie watch list for third straight season. 20 centers are named to that preseason list. She finished in the top 10 last year. Yarden Garzon was named to the Cheryl Miller watch list for small forwards. Again, 20 players on that list. And then yesterday, I believe, was when I saw this, Indiana had a secret closed scrimmage, whatever term you want to give it, with St. Louis. On Sunday, they won that scrimmage. It was reported 95-61 IU shot 53.4% from the field, 47.8% on threes. Some stats that came out of this, and kudos to Talia Goodman, on who I saw this from on Twitter. I want to make sure we credit her. Mackenzie Holmes at 18 points, 13 rebounds, 7-11 from the field. Sydney Perry, 17 points, 5 of 5 on threes, 6 of 7 overall. Jules Lamondola, and we're going to talk a lot, I think, quite a bit about our freshman tonight, 13 points, and Yarden Garzon, 12 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. And for her, that found this on ESPN. IU at Stanford is one of the 12 best non-conference matchups according to ESPN and Charlie Cream. Hoosier Connect is having a drive on November 14th to raise funds for their NIL collective. In Indiana high school girls basketball, in high school girls basketball news, saw this on ESPN yesterday as well. Overtime Select will begin a 4-week league for elite high school girls team players, taking place in the summer of 2024 at their facility in Atlanta. So I think we're starting to see, and Andy, I want to get your thoughts on this a little bit after I read the headlines, but and I know you don't maybe follow recruiting as much as Ryan does, but it seems like we're really starting to see the girls game move toward at least the kind of where the guys were maybe 10 years or so ago, with the elite AAU programs now kind of moving this way. Happy birthday to Alexi Bargesser, her birthday today. As we said, Mackenzie Holmes was named to the AP preseason All-American team. She was joined by Caitlin Clark as the preseason player of the year. And then Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, Paige Beckers, and Elizabeth Kitley from Virginia Tech. And then just want to pass along this. I felt like it was, these are things that doing a women's basketball broadcast or podcast, it just felt like talk about a little bit. I want to pass our condolences along to the Georgetown women's basketball family on the passing of their coach, Tasha Butts, who lost a 2-year battle with breast cancer earlier this week. So, but Andy, I want to throw it over to you and welcome you to the podcast tonight and to doing the work you've been on here a couple times with in the past on some post-game shows, but just what's going on for you these days. And again, for those who don't follow as much on the men's side, Andy is one of the best bracketologists in the business. And so you may see him a little bit later in the season with his bracketology. But Andy, just kind of your thoughts overall, what have you been up to? And again, kind of that, about the recruiting that I mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, just getting excited for the season on both the men's and the women's side. With Hoosier Hysteria, that's as we've talked about a lot. Not really an event to draw conclusions from or to really get anything from there, but really just to build excitement for the season. And I certainly think on both sides of things that was true. Hearing, kind of watching Twitter go as Yarden was on fire in the 3-point contest was exciting. And I think, you couple that with the performance that you saw out of her in the secret scrimmage, just with the all around game. I think she's a player you'll look forward to take a leap. And I know we'll talk more about that in the show, but just lots of things to be excited about from an IU basketball perspective on both the men's and the women's side. So really looking forward to seeing kind of what this team looks like. And we'll talk on here about, how things come together as we go, but lots of exciting things there. And in terms of the high school basketball stuff, it'll be interesting to see, how something like that grows. You've got, in a lot of the cases on the men's side, you've got some of these somewhat storied AAU programs that everybody knows about and different things like that. It'll be interesting to see how much the women's game progresses in that direction where, I think the talent today is probably a little bit more spread out on the women's side as opposed to some of the men's, AAU teams is, you've just got the ones that you just hear about all the time. So it'll be interesting to see how this impacts that. If it really kind of at least moves it more closely toward what we're seeing there, but be interested to see what kind of players they get as they roll it out. And certainly there might be some people that take a wait and see approach, but if it's successful, I think you could pretty easily see it expanding.
Yeah, and the one thing I thought was interesting was some of the people that they're, I can't remember if they use the term advisors or what, but some of the WNBA stars that are supposedly on board with advising on this, like a Brianna Stewart and some of the others that obviously the kids know, at least by name pretty well. Kathy, I'll throw it over to you. Just kind of catch us up with what you've been doing the last week and what you thought about the headlines.
Yeah, for me personally, been just doing the same old boring stuff, working. Basically, they still want me to work to get my paycheck, I guess. So I do. So nothing exciting on that front on a personal level. For me, I was excited to see some of the numbers coming out for that secret scrimmage. Again, it was one tweet. We didn't get to see any highlights, and we won't see anything in person other than the Hoosier Hysteria skills and other contests that they had until November 1st with the exhibition. But I was really excited to see that Mackenzie played actually long enough to get to 18 points. And we don't know how long it took her, but, we know she didn't play when they went over to Greece. And, we've already heard they're going to need to try to, maybe limit her a little bit more than they have in the past years, just because of her knee injuries that she's had. So it was good to see though she was still able to get an 18 points and 13 rebounds in that game. And then surprisingly was Jules Lamandola, there's the 13 points there. So freshman coming in, we haven't, outside of Yarden last year, we haven't historically seen under Coach Moore a lot of freshmen getting a lot of playing time and a lot of runs. So she might be another surprise freshman that we'll have to keep an eye on, I think, this year.
Yeah, and I think a shout out to our friend Ari, who sometimes will be here with us in the Workaholics on the live YouTube feed. But he pointed out to us that at Hoosier Hysteria, it looked like Mac was moving pretty well, and so that was a refreshing piece of news. But I think we also got to keep that back of our head that we thought she was moving pretty well at the beginning of last year too. And it kind of got to her at the end of the year a little more again. So we'll see how that goes along. So let's take that dive into the IU women's program here. The preseason in the Big Ten, third by the coaches, second by the media. They come into the season number 9 preseason ranking AP and coaches nationally. And so, Kathy, I'm going to throw it to you first. Just pick somebody. Obviously, Mackenzie Holmes, probably the first person we want to talk about. I'll let you kind of talk about Mac a little bit and give us your thoughts about what Mac has, been obviously, and what you think the season holds for her.
Yeah. So I think what we're talking a lot maybe this year for Mackenzie is where she's at on some of those all-time lists, right? So, I did a little rebound or a little digging into a lot of them, and we can take them one by one or not. But I think the one that's very interesting to me is points, obviously. So right now she's 4th overall on that top 10 list all time with 1,897 points. She looks pretty safe to say she's going to move into 3rd and 2nd for sure. So 3rd place is 1910. 2nd is 1917. The question is, can she catch Tyra Best? So she's got 2,364 points. So I did a little math, former accountant, so I'm pretty good at that. And to catch Tyra, she would need to average 16.6 points per game before any postseason play. And for reference, last year she averaged 22 points per game. The question, I think, becomes the minutes. Do we see that reduction of minutes that we're hearing might be happening this year that maybe reduces her average points per game? I think if she's going to get to that basically 17 points per game, I think it's going to be tight. But what are your thoughts on her overtaking Tyra, I guess, Andy, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think if the minutes wasn't a concern, I think it would be an easy choice to say that she'll catch her. But I think even so with her against lesser competition, I mean, if you assume that most of the minutes they're going to try to rest her is in some of these non-conference games, I think she's so talented in those situations that she doesn't have to be out there that long to potentially, rack up enough points so it doesn't hurt too much. So I'm inclined to think that she catches her. I think if nothing else, it's a nod to being optimistic that she'll be healthy enough to play that much to do it. And I think we all hope for that for sure. So I think she gets it, even though, they may be careful with her early in the season. I thought that was a good point, Kathy. I thought the same thing when I saw how many points she scored in that scrimmage. Was like, well, the most important thing is that she was out there. The second was that she was out there long enough to be able to put up numbers. So I think even her, if she's playing 20 minutes a game and she's playing half the game in some of the non-conference games, given the advantage she's going to have over some of those teams, I think she could still get to double figures and kind of stay on track in that way.
Right. Yeah. And to point out too, that 17 points per game, I did that math, not counting any postseason games. So no Big Ten tournament and no NCAA tournament. So, and I believe those points count in there. Right.
Yeah. Any game she plays would count in there. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what I did. I just, if they get 30 games, she's just got to average about 15 and a half. You take it to
Yep.
out to like 30. The other thing too, though, we're kind of assuming a little bit, maybe something we don't know. And that's that she played a ton of minutes in that secret scrimmage. She's so efficient, 7 for 11 to get 18 points. So, and 13 rebounds. Now, that may be the more indicative stat that she played several more minutes, that she played some minutes, that she had the 13 rebounds. But one thing about Mackenzie, even if she is only getting 20, 21 minutes a night against some of the non-conference, she's so efficient in around the basket and with her shooting that I think she catches Tyra, barring it, knock on wood, we don't want anything to happen to her. But as long as she stays healthy and can get about 20 minutes plus per game, and we know she'll play more than that against the better teams, and especially in the Big Ten against the better teams. I think she breaks the record pretty easily. I think she'll set the record now where it's going to be hard to get to for, once we get back to kids who are basically only players. Excuse me. I always say kids. They get back to players playing 4 seasons.
4 years. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, Jeff, she's second right now, third right now on the field goals made, to talk about how many field goals she's been able to make in her career, and to overtake Rochelle Bostic, who is in first place. She only needs to average basically 2 field goals per game. So I think that's one list that she'll definitely come out on top of for sure by the end of the season. So yeah, I think the thing that we dwell on so much with Mackenzie is, how many points, how efficient, but sometimes we forget some of the most important things we get from Mackenzie is her defense, right? I mean, she was defensive player of the year in the conference last year. And so I think that's something we need to touch on right now as well. And so again, I think that goes back to, what Ari was talking about. And I noticed that as well during Hoosier Hysteria. She did look pretty mobile. She didn't have any major things on her knees, braces or anything. And, that's a lot going on for your defense. I'll be curious if her defense holds up again this year, like it did last year, and what we see out of her from there.
So Andy, you got anything else you want to add about Mac?
No, I know Kathy put in a couple others in here. Block shots might be one that's a little bit. I think the field goals made one. Feel pretty good about that one. The block shots though looks like you got in here. She needs 61 to take first place in block shots, which is close to what she had last year. So that one might be that one. There might be a little bit more drama as to whether she catches that, but I think if she plays enough, again, probably good. I mean, kind of amazing. We talked about this so many times last year of being able to watch Trace kind of rocket up the list on the men's side and having another talented, front court presence on the women's side. And she's going to end up just as high, if not higher, in all the women's categories as what he did. And just a testament to how she's grown in her career. And that article was, I remember we went to a game with my family. I think it was maybe her freshman year. And she had kind of started to find her groove at that point. Maybe it was her sophomore year, but yeah, just kind of funny to look at where she is now. And then some of those anecdotes about how nervous she was and everything at the beginning, just, the kind of thing that makes it fun to follow a college sports team and a college sports program.
Yeah. And I know we're not mediocre Jay here, Andy, but Kathy, I'll take the over on the rebounds. I think she'll get more than 7 rebounds a game. So I think you'll see her move up that rebound list a little bit farther as well. I don't think she'll get to number 1, but I think she'll be over 7 rebounds a game. What about you two?
I would tend to take the over on that. I do think you have, Yarden's a pretty good rebounder, and
I think it's going to be really close.
You've just got enough other people who may be able to contribute there, but I don't see her doing less than what she did a year ago. So I would tend to take the over on that as well. Sorry, Kathy.
Kathy, you got anything you want to add about the rebounding?
Yeah, the question for me, I think, on rebounds is, again, how much time she ends up. Yeah, for me, I think the rebound question comes down to, actually not so much what Mackenzie does as much as what Lily Meister might be able to do, right? Lily, I think, looks to be poised to probably be her backup. And so do they use Lily maybe a little bit more than they did last year? Which again leads to that maybe reduced production for Mackenzie. So I think it's going to be really close. She needs 61, 60. I'm sorry, that's block shots. She needs to average, like you said, 7 per game. And what did she average last year? Jeff, do you have that handy?
Yeah, I actually do. If I can pull it up here real quick.
I think it was like
7.3.
Yeah, 7.3. It was right around
7.3. Yeah,
7.
7.3. So
Yeah, it's going to
But
be really close, really close.
so,
Yeah.
and then so obviously, this is interesting, and Andy brought up a really good comparison to TJD, but you just graduate a player that I've heard Jared use this phrase, so I'm going to borrow it from him, that Grace Berger's a Mount Rushmore IU women's player. I think Mackenzie Holmes is going to be a Mount Rushmore type player. And it's interesting to kind of see this, this dynamic that, they're two different types of players, but I think they both have the same ability to lead. And when you listen to the players talk a little bit, like at Big Ten Media Days or in some of the interviews they do, just how much they value Mac in terms of what she says and how she goes about her work. And I just think that's where you really see Terry Morin's program's foundation, that whether it's Allie Patberg passing it on to Grace Berger, or Grace Berger to Mackenzie Holmes, and now you're hoping Mackenzie Holmes will pass it along to a Yarden Garzon or somebody like that. I think that's when you really start to see that foundation of that great leadership of that's coming through the program. What do you think, Kathy?
Yeah, I agree, and I think we're hearing that a lot, and again, back to Lily Meister, I think, I've heard, reports that Mackenzie's taken her under her wing. If you saw her at Hoosier Hysteria, at least for me, the little bit I saw of her anyway, whatever you can take from it, she does look like she, has kind of put on some muscle and kind of worked on her body. And Mackenzie went through all of that, right?
Yep.
So I feel like, Lily is really starting to walk in the footsteps that Mackenzie has laid down in front of her. So time will tell. She's only played one season, so we'll see if she can make a sophomore leap for us this year. But she's one person I'm pretty high on. I think coming into next year to make a nice leap from what we saw from her last year. And I think a lot of that, to your point, Jeff, is because of the foundation others have laid, and especially Mackenzie Holmes as well right now with Lily.
Yeah, I think that cultural piece of it is that's where obviously it's a chicken and egg thing, how much of that has contributed to the winning and the success that they've had recently. But you contrast that to the men's program, there just hasn't been that foundational, this is what we're about. Here's people to pass it along to the next class of players and the next class of players after that. And, talk so much about what's the team's identity. Like there's no question about that with the women's program. That's obviously first and foremost a testament to Terry Morin, but also bringing in players who can pass that along. And again, it's easy to let the winning feed into that and be like, yeah, that's, that makes it easier to follow those kinds of things. But you do feel good as the torch has been passed enough times where you feel like, okay, nobody's going to drop it at this point with the women's program, as you've gone, kind of lost different players and moved on from different players. But, the trajectory of the program has really stayed the same through all that. And, Max, one who, again, not to go back to that story again, but really grew into that role as being that ambassador for the program and the person who's the next one to pass it down. And so really excited to see, who that next person is going to be. Obviously a few candidates, but awesome to see, and just speaks so well of what the program has been able to do.
And Andy, I'm going to throw it right back to you here. Why don't you take a chance? Why don't you take the opportunity to fill us in? Obviously one of the other big players coming back. She had a very good outing in the secret scrimmage. That's Sydney Parrish.
Yeah, there was something I read. I forget where it was. It talked about she was playing really well in the in practices, and a lot of good reviews of her play in the off season. So, she seems poised to at least pick up some of the scoring slack that they'll need to do with Grace gone. And she was an effective scorer a year ago, scoring 12 a game. But I think she's one that can take a leap, whether she ends up being the second leading scorer or not. I think there's probably a couple different candidates for that, but I do think she's one that you can kind of count on to be able to pick up some of the scoring slack. And I think in some ways it's a little bit of, the shooting is going to be important, but she's, first year with the program last year. I wouldn't say there was growing pains by any means, but I think she'll be more comfortable as she gets in there. Seems like she shot the ball well, both, at Hoosier Hysteria, also in the scrimmage. I think those are all positive signs. She's going to get, having somebody like Mac, people are going to get open looks from the outside, and the ability to knock those down consistently is going to be critical. But she's somebody who can score in different ways. And I think one of the things that you'd like to see from her, It's just maybe this is all anecdotal, and I'm sure there's stats that either back this up or don't back this up, but finding ways to keep her out of foul trouble. I thought there were some big
Yes.
games last year that she got herself in foul trouble by, being aggressive and kind of doing things you want to do, but you got to, at this point, it's even that much more important this year to be able to keep her on the floor. So, can
Yep.
she evolve in that way? I think that'll be really important. So not to keep drawing parallels between this and the men's program, but it's like the Malik Renew question of like, how do you stay out of foul trouble and stay on the floor? And with her, especially in the big games, they're going to need her, but I think she's a great candidate to be the second leading scorer on the team. If she's able to build on all the things that it sounds like she's been able to do in the offseason.
Yeah, I want to pop in on that because that's exactly what I was thinking about was her
Me
foul
too.
situation. I was looking at the numbers today, and she averaged about 3 fouls a game. Now, look, I'll be first one to subscribe to the philosophy as a coach that, especially in a college game, if you're playing 20, 25, 30 minutes, you don't get a couple fouls, you probably would. I'm going to ask what you're doing. Are you really involved in some of the action? But she averaged 3 fouls a game, and in her starts, she didn't start every game last year. So, but in the starts, she averaged almost 4 fouls a game. We got to have her on the floor in key moments, without having to worry about her foul trouble. So that was the one thing I was going to bring up about Sydney, because I agree totally what Andy said. Kathy, I'll throw it over to you for your thoughts. I totally agree that I think Sydney, along with maybe another person we're going to talk about here in a minute, is probably who we're looking at to be the second leading scorer for the team this year.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. In fact, I had the foul storyline was absolutely my headline for Sydney as well. And I would say, to be honest, it's critical in my opinion for this team. They don't have Grace anymore. They need Sydney in there with her leadership and her scoring ability. And when she is in there and playing aggressively under control, she can be a torment on defense and rebounding as well. And so I think honestly, she's the key to this team's success this year, in my opinion. I really do. I think her ability to be able to stay on the floor more than she did last year. Three fouls per game is okay, but if she's going to be starting, her minutes are expected to go up. 4 fouls per game is not going to do it, because she's going to now have to sit on the bench more. And I just really think it's critical, I think, for this team to have her on the floor. So to me, I think outside of McKenzie, who is obvious, I think Sydney's probably one of the most important players on this team, and keeping her on the floor, I think, is critical for the team.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. And I'm going to take it on to Yarden Garzon. And I think Yarden's probably the other one that we're thinking about, at least right off the top of our heads, is going to be right there in that battle to be the second leading scorer on the team. Yarden comes back from an all Big Ten freshman year. She was second team all Big Ten. She started all 32 games. And for Coach Moore to trust a freshman that much, that's kind of unusual in this program for under Terry Moore. And again, I'm not opposed to it, but it just was not something you were used to seeing. It was her really throwing a freshman into the fire for a lot of minutes right off the bat. I think it also helped. Obviously, Yarden had played a little bit of international basketball, for Israel and her club team and stuff. So it was coming there. She averaged 11 points a game. She shot 45.8% from the 3-point line. And as we mentioned already, she had a really nice all-around game in the secret scrimmage. And when we mentioned this a little bit, Andy, last week, and I'll throw it to you first here, about the basketball might right now, with everything that's going on with Yarden and being from Israel and everything that's going on and with her family and everything, that time where she can be in the gym with her teammates and playing a game may be the few minutes during a day where she doesn't have to think about what's going on halfway around the world. And so we might actually see her play as expected and not have to worry about whether or not, she's, kind of caught up in some of the things going on that none of us obviously have any control over, neither does she. But, I like those numbers I saw coming out of the secret scrimmage.
Yeah, and I think she's somebody. You even look last year, she averaged 3 assists per game, and so again, as a freshman to be able to step in, really passed it well, hit some big shots from 3-point range, shot almost 46% from 3 as a freshman. So you look at something like that, and you really feel like the sky's the limit. I think one of the things I read in the offseason was maybe trying to get her inside a little bit more. She does a lot of her damage outside. But again, I think you put somebody in a position to be a playmaker a little bit inside the arc. She's got good size, can score in a lot of different ways. And so maybe what we saw some of those numbers from the scrimmage with 6 assists, is putting her in a position to find teammates a little bit more, or be able to make that next pass if Matt kicks it out to her, and be able to make the next pass for a bucket. But yeah, I think it's so easy to get excited about somebody with her size and skill set, to be somebody else, again, to take a little bit of the pressure off, and somebody really the defenses have to account for, can't leave alone when shooting 46%. It's that is quite a luxury to have. If they want to sag off of her and give her shots, they can, but she's also got the size to be able to shoot over people. And so really, really excited to see how she grows as a sophomore. And I certainly feel for her with everything going on. Can't really imagine at that age to be across the world dealing with some of those kinds of things. And so I think you've seen a lot of great things from her teammates in terms of what support they're giving her. And I think, Jeff, to your point, maybe basketball can be a little bit of an escape at some point of everything else that's going on. But hard to put yourself in those shoes, even at my age now, to think like how I'd be able to handle that, let alone somebody who's 19, 20 years old, having to deal with some of that from so far away. So excited to see what she can do from a basketball perspective. Obviously, she's got greater things to kind of worry about, but so much potential there with her. And so that's another one, that the secret scrimmage, you take those numbers, it's like, okay, the well-roundedness and the all-around game that you are excited to see from her, like that only furthers the excitement about that.
Kathy, your thoughts on Yarden?
Yeah, so I think similar to Sydney, I think for me, what I'm hoping to see for Yarden is that the game slows down, because she had times as well last year where she'd get herself into some foul trouble. So again, hopefully she'll be able to have that game kind of slow down for her, and really be able to stay out on the floor for us, because when you have somebody that shoots 46% from three, and I don't know that she'll replicate it or not. I mean, again, Hoosier Hysteria told us very little other than she can shoot 19 of 25 when she's not guarded under a time pressure situation. So how much that translates into the game, we'll have to see. But yeah, the thing that I really liked, and you both kind of pointed out too, was the 6 assists. She had quite a few assists last year. And Andy, yeah, I heard that a number of times with Coach Moore in interviews where she said, Yarden is a big guard, and they're actually going to try putting her down low more, actually on the post, and post her up as a guard from time to time. And I just find that really intriguing to see how that will work with our different lineups and stuff. So I expect that, especially with Grace being gone, some of, the improvements maybe we're hearing from Yarden and from Sydney, some of the freshmen coming in, I think we might see some different looks from the Hoosiers this year on offense too. And I think Yarden's going to contribute to that, to Andy's point, because she's going to be one well-rounded player where, how do you defend that? Especially if Mackenzie's in there. I think that, those two, along with Sydney, and if Sarah can start lighting up at her Minnesota levels, I think that lineup in particular is really going to give the defenses some fits.
So, Kathy, I'm going to throw it right back to you, and then we'll kind of run back around the horn with it. But why don't you dive into and I think if we would have given out awards last year, the most improved player, Chloe Moore McNeil.
Right. Yeah. So I was really high on Chloe coming into the
Yes,
season last year, and she absolutely didn't disappoint me at all. So Chloe last year finished on the all Big Ten second team, and she was on the all defensive team last year. She started all 32 of her games. She averaged 33 minutes, which, if I remember correctly, was right up there with towards the top. I think she and Grace had the most minutes of all the players last year. She's not out there to light it up in terms of double digit points. She was real close, 9.5 points per game, but we can see that from her for sure. What I think she's out there more is going to be for facilitating and really helping. She was the leader in assists last year per game in the Big Ten, and one of the top 5, if I remember, in the country. And she ended up with 4.8 assists per game. And then, of course, on the defensive side with 1.4 steals per game. But Chloe's been really fun to see her 3 years too, right? I mean, she goes from only averaging around 7 minutes per game her freshman year to 21 to 33. I mean, that's a huge jump to take in those 3 years. And, she's just plays with such tenacity, and, hearing teammates talk about her, she's clearly loved by her teammates as well. And I think they look to her to really be a leader of the team, whether it's quietly or vocally. We don't see her talking maybe a whole lot, but that doesn't mean she's not in practices or whatever. So I think for me, Chloe seems to be maybe that kind of steady rudder, if you will, for the team. She seems to be the leader. I think, I would expect her to fill a lot of that point guard capabilities in position for us this year.
Andy, your thoughts about Chloe?
Yeah, I mean, it's just fun to watch her development last year, and some of that was accelerated when she had to really take over running the show when Grace was out, and I think that's something that, while in the moment was not ideal, it's something that really pays dividends this year, given the role that she's going to be asked to play, and I think she'll score a little bit as she did a year ago, but I think the facilitation and getting other people the ball where they need to get it is going to be job one for her, and job two is just hounding the crap out of the other team's best perimeter player defensively.
Caitlin Clark.
And so, yeah, exactly. So excited to see, how she can expand her game. Her shooting got a little bit better last year. If she takes a similar jump, she gets up to, maybe a 37% 3-point shooter, just gives you that threat. She's certainly not somebody you can just totally slough off of as you go through and do that. But I think kind of the, consummate point guard leader, and the point person defensively for a team that really wants to hang its hat on the defensive end.
Yeah, two things I'm going to point out here for Chloe, and again, we'll give credit to Kathy because she was on the Chloe Moore McNeil drum beat last year at this time, talking about how much she thought Chloe was going to bring to the table. So kudos to Kathy on that. But I'm going to go to two things. Her assist to turnover ratio, 3.2. She 3 assists for every turnover she was committing. And that is huge for a point guard, especially at the college level. I can't imagine. I always thought a 3-to-1 ratio for a high school point guard was really good. And so for a college point guard to really have that kind of assist to turnover ratio tells you she was valuing the ball. She understood what her job was to get the offense kind of initiated. I think we'll see her step up the scoring a little bit more this year. I think she'll jump it up into double figures. I'm not saying she's going to go to 15 or 16, but I can see her getting to 12. Again, that's basically one more bucket a game. And the other thing I'm really looking forward to, she shot 85% at the free throw line last year. And again, guards who can knock down free throws at the end of games can take you a long way. And that's, I think, is one of those things I'm going to continue to look and watch. You notice her the year before she shot 73%, which I would take. But if she can stay around that 80 to 85% range free throw shooting, that's what you want. You want kids like that, a Sydney Parrish and Mackenzie Holmes. Well, I shouldn't throw Mac in there because more of a post player, but a Sydney Parrish, a Yarn Garzon, a Chloe Moore McNeil knocking down free throws in the games because you want your ball handlers to have the ball. All right. So, but that was the two things I really stuck out. I'm going to throw it over.
Kind of real quick on one thought I also had on Chloe, to your point with the free throws, her free throw attempts last year were 102 free throws. You compare that to her freshman and sophomore year, were 17 and 33. So she went from 33 to 102 free throws attempted, and she's knocking them down. So that tells us two things. One, she can shoot the ball at the free throw line, which is good under pressure, but she's being very aggressive as well, too, to get those fouls called as well. So I just look for more of that, the more she's got the ball in her hands this coming year.
Yeah. So, Andy, I want to throw it over to you for Sarah Scalia or for Sarah Scalia. And what do you think of Sarah? And I think we kind of all felt like she was going to have a bigger impact last year than ended up happening. But I'm one to think that Sarah could really be a key to this team this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think she's another one I've heard good things about in the offseason. And quite honestly, when you look at the role she was asked to play at Minnesota, really before she came to IU, I think it's fair for there to be an adjustment period. Came into a really well-established team with roles pretty well carved out. And even her over the course of the season, she started about half the games, came off the bench in the others. I think easy to make a case for maybe why her impact felt like less than maybe what was expected. But I think overall she still brings the shooting. You saw that in flashes. I know. I think one of the post-game shows I filled in on with you was a game that she played really well against Michigan, if I'm remembering it correctly, and shot it really well. So that shooter is still in there, even though it was a little bit less than what she showed at Michigan. And I think when you start to figure out who can help pick up some of the scoring slack that you have with Grace leaving, she's definitely one that's going to be there. Super experienced, good teammate, has another year in the system with her, and I think somebody who could who's going to play a big role on this team. And I think Sydney being able to step up. I know Kathy mentioned earlier that may be really will help dictate which way the team goes. I think Sarah's another big one. Like if she can get to a point where she again, you talked about this with Chloe, bump up by a couple points a game, you get into double figures and you do some of those things. It's, and shoots it well. Just the spacing that this team could have on the floor with Mac in there and the shooters around her. If she shoots it well, you kind of forcing other teams to pick their poison on the defensive end with what they want to try to do.
Yeah, I think Sarah can be a little bit of a streak shooter, but I really think two things I want to say about Sarah, and I'll throw over to Kathy for her thoughts. Is we've seen some video of her this offseason where she really looks like she's leaned out. We were talking with Amanda Foster about this a little bit last week, and Amanda said that even though she was at media day, it was hard to tell just because they didn't really see them going up and down the floor or anything. But everything she's hearing is the same thing. And also, second thing here, Kathy and I had a great chance to have Lenny Holmes, Mackenzie Holmes' dad, on over the summer, actually in August after he got back from Greece, and he was basically, you keep an eye on Sarah Scalia, that she is going to be that kid that, or that player that I think is going to surprise. And I think everything we're hearing seems to be the same thing. A couple of things I've seen about practice sounds like she's looked very good in practice. And so I think we really have an opportunity to maybe see the Sarah that we saw against us when she played at Minnesota. So, but we didn't get any of the stats for her out of the secret scrimmage, but that doesn't mean she didn't do much. I mean, Talia may have only had so much information she could get into a tweet and stuff. So, but I'm really looking forward to Sarah's game this season. So, Kathy, your thoughts on Sarah?
Yeah, I think, again, Sarah is like Andy mentioned, I think she's another one that we have to see step up similar to Sydney. We've talked about this on a few other podcasts this offseason. You're not going to replace Grace with another Grace. There is no other Grace out there. Each player is unique. And Sarah, and we've talked about by committee. And I really think that Sarah and Sydney have to be the two in particular, and maybe a few more points from Yarden, to step up and fill that point production that we're going to be losing with Grace not coming back. So that to me is also another key player, I think. And, where I'd also like to see Sarah, I think now that she's had a year under her belt, is interesting to be how she can step up on the defensive end as well. I think we saw Sydney really embrace that last year. I think Yarden could be a pretty good defensive player at times, and I'd like to see a step up from her. But I think that's a place I'd really like to see Sarah grow as well. So yeah, she shot 38% at Minnesota from 3-point. As a career 3-point specialist is what she was really known for there. And, she was down to 34 last year, which is still respectable. But like Andy said, that shooter's still in there. And I think it's just her getting her confidence back. And, I assume both of you probably agree she's probably going to slip back into that starter role with Grace leaving, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. So hopefully that helps her, gives her that, added incentiveness. And is that right? Incentive. There you go. That incentive to really step up her production as well. She's going to be looked on to be as a leader. She's been playing ball now for 4 years. This is her 5th year, right?
I believe so.
I think she played 3 at Minnesota. So yeah. So I think Sarah's definitely got it in her. So I'm excited to see what she does as well.
And we have one big loss, and the key loss that we've talked about. We've mentioned her several times already, so we're not going to spend a lot of time with Grace Berger. But Grace Berger graduated with over 1,800 points, over 500 assists, and over 700 rebounds. I mean, she did some things that very few IU women's players have done in their career. And like I said, I think when you talk about the Mount Rushmore of IU women's basketball, Grace Berger is going to be on there. Andy, I'll throw it to you. Just really kind of your thoughts on what Grace meant to the program.
Everything really is what she meant to the program. I think,
Yeah.
You look at all the ways that she could impact the game, the competitiveness, different ways that she could score, and even over the course of her career, playing different roles, becoming more of a facilitator at times. And so, it's no different than when she was out last year, right? You're not replacing one person is not replacing her. You need everybody to take a little bit of what she did, to try to fill in the gaps for all the things that she brought to the table. And so that really is the same thing that happens this year. And I think there's a lot of good candidates to do it, to kind of pick up a little bit of the slack here and there, but just an incredibly well-rounded player that impacted the game in so many different ways. That is, like I said, it's nice to be able to have an All-American to fall back on to be able to help ease the blow of losing that. But you've got all the other perimeter players. The last 4 players that we've talked about all have things that they'll need to do to step their game up to help come close to easing the loss of everything that Grace brought to the game.
Kathy?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't replace that all at once. We talked about a lot of her scoring, but what you can't really replace is the intangibles, right? Her leadership and just her drive and we talked a lot about culture earlier. She had that get into the gym, that doing all of the work that the program has embodied since Coach Morin has been there. And, they have just such a nice, clear identity, I think, as a team, right? They work hard, they do extra work. They are a defense first team. And I think Grace really embodied all of that. And you can't just replace that with one person for sure. You talked about points, but there's also her assists. So, Chloe, we talked about with her assists, Yarden with the assists, that's still a lot of production from Grace on that side, and the rebounds and the defense. There's just so much that she has going on that you can't just replace. So it is definitely a big loss. I think that's probably obviously the biggest reason why, the team right now is projected second or third in the Big Ten and not first, with, 4 of their 5 starters coming back from their championship team. That whole of Grace is going to be interesting to see how we fill it, which I definitely think the talent is there. It'll be a question of who steps up and if they're consistent enough to do it.
Kathy, I'm going to throw it right back to you. I want to get your thoughts on a couple of players that we didn't really include, and just realized as we're going through the show tonight that we didn't have really on the run sheet, but I'm really intrigued by. You've mentioned one, that's Lily Meister, and for another one, that's birthday girl, Lexi Bargesser. I really think, again, Lily may not put up huge stats this year just because she's playing behind Mac, but I really am looking forward to the development of those two this year, just because, again, I think depth for once. I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that we're going to go 8-9 deep, and if we are, they're going to be 2 of the players in that rotation.
Yeah, I agree. I think, we had such a nice freshman class last year, in particular, when you talk about Yarden, Lily, and Lexi coming in. We, and Hannah Sandvik as well, but those 2 in particular, I think I could see. I've talked a lot about Lily, but we haven't talked enough about Lexi. Unfortunately, yes, belated happy birthday to her. I'm sure she's listening, but anyway, I think there's really big things for Lexi too, because she's had another year of healing and therapy for her knee. I don't think she's been wearing that really big brace that we saw in her last year. And that's just going to free her up for movement, which helps her with scoring. It's going to help her with her lateral movement for defense. And so I think there's a lot of things from Lexi that we might be surprised by her as well. But we'll see when we gets on the floor. She was, a freshman last year, so she had some really great moments, and then other times just hardly got onto the floor. So we'll see if she can be a little more of a consistent contributor this year, and that, hopefully with the knee, especially, I think is going to go a long way to helping her contribute a lot more consistently.
Andy, your thoughts on Lily and or Lexi?
Yeah, I think both of them will play important roles. I think given, what we've seen, Yarden excluded, Terry Morin hasn't shown a great proclivity toward wanting to play freshmen a whole lot. So that opens the door for the first couple people off the bench to be the people who are sophomores. And as you look at those 2, I think, Lily, again, it goes back a little bit to the whole load management question, whatever you want to call it, with Mackenzie. But if they want to do some of that, particularly early on, it could give Lily a chance to, 1, get a good chunk of minutes, and 2, really get into a little bit of a groove, and maybe get a rotation set where she's kind of coming in at set times of the game and different things like that. And I think they both showed in very, very complementary roles some flashes a year ago. And, best thing about freshmen is they become sophomore, as the old adage goes. And I think it's a year for them under their belt to be in the right spots defensively and things like that, where they can pick up the slack, and Lily can just get a couple putbacks or something like that. I mean, there's not, the good thing for them is they're not going to be asked to make, massive contributions on the score sheet. They can really step in, play complementary roles, and give themselves a chance to work their way into the rotation. But I think both of them will be absolutely, key parts of things, and probably, 2 of the first people off the bench without a doubt.
So let's hit the newcomers real quick. Kathy, I'll go throw it back to you. because I'm one that I agree with both of you. I think both of them are going to play key roles. I think that Lexi's knee injury maybe held her back a little bit that she suffered in high school. Even I think they tried to manage her a little bit, make sure they weren't overplaying her and had her moments. But let's talk about Lene Beaumont and Jules Amendola. And we had the opportunity to have Lene on the show over the summertime. Great, great interview. Well spoken for such a young lady. And then Jules had a really good secret scrimmage with St. Louis. She as a freshman, we said 13 points for the Hoosiers there. So, Andy, just what little you may know about Lene and Jules, what do you possibly see their roles?
I think they'll be brought along slowly would be my guess. I'm doing that based on history as much as anything, secret scrimmage results notwithstanding. I think you kind of got to go with the track record of what you've typically seen from Terry Morin. And so I think there's good pedigree with both. Really enjoyed the interview you guys did with Lene over the summer. And so I think they're going to be pieces. I think they need to be ready if there's opportunities for them to get in games. And given the non-conference schedule, they may have some of those chances. And maybe if they get in there and show out, they work their way into a bigger role. But I think both seem really talented, decent size. And so I think there's a lot of positive things to look forward to with them. I think whatever you get from them this year is probably a bonus. And I don't mean that as a slight to them by any means. It just, given what we've seen from Terry Morin, pretty small rotation, doesn't play freshmen a whole lot. You got to try to figure out maybe one of them kind of wins a job, surpasses the other, and maybe they become a person who really works their way into that rotation. But I think lots of excitement for them in the future. Both had some, pretty decorated high school careers. And so I think the talent is there. Just, I fall back in some of these where I'm not obviously following the women's recruiting as much as I don't even follow the men's recruiting that much, to be honest with you. But so certainly don't know enough specifically about their games. And so in that case, I kind of fall back on what has the coach shown that they want to do and how they typically do things. And we'll kind of make my assumption based on that and hopefully be surprised. And certainly if they play well enough to get minutes, that's going to be an awesome thing for IU, right? Because that'll basically force her hand to do something that she may not want to do as much. And so I think if one of them really establishes himself, that's an awesome sign for where the season could go.
Kathy, your thoughts on the freshman?
Yeah. Originally, when we kind of did a breakdown of them earlier this summer, I thought Lene might be the one of the two that might really be the contributor between the two. But I've kind of flipped my narrative in my head based on some of the reports we're hearing out of their Greece trip and practice, and now the secret scrimmage. I'm almost wondering if Jules might work her way into a regular participant in that rotation, maybe that eighth person. We talked a lot about Lily and Lexi maybe being 6 and 7. I could see Jules potentially being an eighth one from what I'm hearing, and the teeny bit we saw her seems like her motor is really high. In particular. But yeah, I tend to be more like Andy, though. I think, based on the history of Coach Morin, she doesn't tend, outside of Yarden, our exception freshman, she doesn't tend to play freshmen a whole lot. And without having seen them, I'm not sure that I could say that either one of them are going to get meaningful minutes a whole lot this year. What I like about them, though, is that they do lay a nice foundation for future years. And so that's where I hope, especially in some of these earlier games, these non-conference games that aren't Stanford or Tennessee, that maybe they're getting a lot of run in some of these games so that, they start laying getting a lot more experience early on. But they, from everything we heard from them and about them, their work ethic, again, they just fit so nicely into that culture and that identity of the program. That's what I like about them. Now, I don't know if this year we're going to see a whole lot of them, but I think we'll see a lot from them, potentially even next year in their sophomore year, but definitely as 4-year players that will be at the program.
And Kathy, I'll throw it right back to you just a little bit. What little we know about Charnice Curry-Jelks?
Yeah, so Charnice is coming from us, NC State, right?
No, Tennessee, Tennessee Tech.
Tennessee Martin. Yeah.
Tennessee Martin, that's it.
Tennessee Martin. Yes. We'll get there. Somebody south and warm. Yes, Tennessee Martin, because she and Chloe played together in high school. So Sharnice is interesting. I wasn't quite sure where she fits exactly. Maybe as if we're gonna put numbers on positions, maybe as a 4. She's definitely a lot more athletic than what we've seen from other players historically in the program. So that's exciting. I think the question mark, like we were talking off air before we started, is it's been reported that she's has some kind of injury. We think it might be a hamstring, but don't quote us or bet any kind of money on that. But she has some kind of injury. So we're not quite sure what we'll see from her at the beginning of the year. So I think she's going to be an interesting piece, because if she's healthy, I think she could really add an interesting athletic depth to the bench that we just haven't seen in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Andy, any thoughts about Sharnice?
Put up good numbers. I believe she transferred after her freshman year. So put up good numbers, obviously step up in competition. And I think while it's somebody who's got some experience in college basketball, kind of sitting the injury piece aside, there'll be an adjustment period both to the way that IU does things and also to the higher level of competition. But I think as you look about building toward the future, got really good size. And I think somebody who can, kind of help you in the front court, potentially as a backup this year, assuming she is or gets healthy, and somebody who can grow into a bigger role over the course of her career. So always good to have size up front. And so I think we'll be interested to see kind of what she's able to do as she adjusts. But I agree with you, Kathy. It seems like kind of a 4 and could give you a different look up front. So I think that's a good thing, and hopefully she comes along. But I think it's somebody you'd treat in some ways as a little bit like a freshman in terms of acclimating to a new system, new place, and getting to do things the way that Coach Moore wants them done. And so I think whatever you get from her this year is gravy, and maybe somebody who can give you some spot minutes here and there when you need it, or somebody gets in foul trouble.
So Andy,
Exactly.
I'm sorry, Kathy, but Andy, I'm going to throw it right back to you.
I was just agreeing.
I'm going to throw it right back to you here. Let's talk about schedule a little bit. And Kathy and I kind of previewed the non-conference schedule already. So I'll give you a chance just to look at IU's non-conference schedule. 3 marquee matchups really that I see: at Stanford, and then down in a tournament or a showcase where they're going to play Tennessee and Princeton. But what do you think of the non-conference schedule for the Hoosiers?
A lot really rides on the Tennessee and Stanford games, as you guys mentioned on that show a while back when you talked through that. I think if you get to a point, and Princeton is a solid team that IU's got some recent history against as well, but feels like that's one that IU should win. So it really kind of comes down to the other two. It feels like, if you want to at minimum be able to split those games, where your win comes probably doesn't matter. Either one is going to be a good win. Both teams come into the season ranked in the top 25, I believe. So, I think a lot of opportunities, quite on, and the Big Ten is going to give you plenty of chances for quality wins. So not a huge concern about that. But overall, a lot of chances to rack up some wins. You got a couple marquee games. And hopefully some of those other games we talked about before give you chances to do a couple things. One, not put a huge workload on Mackenzie, and 2, get other people some chances to get game action and build that up so you can figure out what your rotation is going to start to look like by the time you get into Big Ten play. So overall, decent balance. I think there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more drop off, at least it seems to me anecdotally, in women's college basketball from the top leagues to really almost any of the other leagues. Whereas I feel like, the men's, it's a little bit more of a gradual. You've got a few middle tier, and then you've got some lower tier leagues. So I think in general, I sit back and look at the schedule and be like, man, there's not really a lot of exciting games on here in the non-conference, but I think probably put together that way somewhat intentionally for, a few different, other reasons that I mentioned. And so I think you look at it and say, hey, how do you split? At a minimum, split those 2 games. You go 2-0 against Tennessee and Stanford. You probably end the non-conference undefeated, and that certainly will be the goal coming in. But I think if you're able to split those, you should be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting matchup, Kathy, at Stanford. We kind of speculated back in the offseason when we talked about the non-conference schedule, but we speculated that Cameron Brink would be a possible first-team All-American, and it came out today that her and McKenzie, that matchup will be 2 preseason All-Americans, essentially that play kind of the same role, both primarily post players, and also is known as well for their defensive play. And both have the ability to at least step outside a little bit and shoot the three. So just a little bit, especially about that Stanford matchup. And if you want to, about Tennessee and Princeton.
Yeah, yeah, we talked about this a lot in our non-conference breakdown, but the Stanford game one is one in particular to be circled. You have the Cameron Brinks versus Mackenzie Holmes matchup, and that's going to be the headliner going into it, as you mentioned.
And
Charlie
on the road.
Premart. And on the road, yes, it's going to be a huge and really soon, right? That's only our
It's
second
like the second game.
second regular game. Yeah. So we have an exhibition, we have EIU, and then 3 days later, we have Stanford on the road. So I think that's just going to tell us a lot about this team and how they are able to come together. And hopefully we'll see fruits of the Greek trip in particular, where maybe they've had that extra time to bond and whatnot. So I think that Stanford game is definitely the marquee matchup. And then of course the Tennessee and Princeton game, for a personal reason, I'm going down over Thanksgiving with Sean to Fort Myers. So I'll be there in person cheering them on. So I'll be looking forward to both of those games as well. Princeton, I just, I don't want people to sleep on them either. They are picked to win the Ivy League and picked pretty handily. And Princeton has had a really good, team the last few years. And so I think you have to really watch out for them. They have a really strong defensive mind as well. So I think that could be a very interesting matchup between us and Princeton. I think it'll be different. If I remember when we did our breakdown in Princeton, they don't have the height that we're going to see from Stanford or Tennessee. So it will be definitely a different kind of team to match up against. So definitely those are the three marquee headlines of the non-conference for sure.
Yeah. So Kathy, I'll throw it back to you real quick. The Big Ten schedule, we really have not talked about. I'll kind of preview a little bit, just get your thoughts about the overall. And I don't think the Big Ten's easy, but I didn't feel like Indiana got any real breaks in the schedule. They're going to play Iowa twice. They're going to play Maryland twice. They're going to play Illinois twice. And the only time they play Ohio State is on the road in Columbus. So, but what do you think of the Big Ten schedule?
Yeah, the Big Ten Women's Conference in particular has just become very a lot deeper than what we have historically seen from it. There's you still have a few teams that are going to be at the bottom that shouldn't give us much problems, but there's a lot of that kind of middle area that we could really see some what people will consider upsets. I think you have to watch out for Purdue, always, with it being a rivalry. We already talked a lot about Illinois in our last podcast about how Illinois has really grown so quickly under their coach. And, you don't know about Maryland and some of these other teams. So, the only break I guess we got was Ohio State only once. But as you mentioned, it's on the road at Ohio State. The one nice thing if we're comparing to last year, is we just don't have that gauntlet that we had to run through in February. So at least our tough games, I would say, they're a little more spread out. We come, here to Iowa City in middle of January. You're at Maryland at the end of January and at Ohio State early February. And then, towards the end, you get at Wisconsin and you have Northwestern sprinkled in there. So I don't think every single game in that February time stretch to me just seems so daunting like it did last year, where it felt like we were playing the top, 4 other teams almost the entire month, and like some kind of round robin, I don't know, gauntlet that the Big Ten thought would be funny. So I do think it was at least a little better there.
I think, and we're going to make some predictions here in a few minutes, but I think that stretch where they play at Iowa, at Maryland, at Ohio State will kind of determine where they finish in the league. I really think that 3-game stretch is going to be huge. Obviously, what other teams do as well. Andy, what do you think about as you look through the IU Big Ten season?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys that the tougher games are a little bit more spaced out than maybe they were a year ago. But when you look at the schedule, as you said, for a league that's got a lot of really good teams, you didn't really get a break with any of them. I guess theoretically, like you said, Kathy, you get a break with only having to play Ohio State once. But when the one time you play them is at their place, that doesn't really feel like as much of a break as maybe it is. So that's where it gets a little bit of that way. And I know you guys had a show earlier in the off season where you kind of talked about how some of the other Big Ten teams were. And it didn't seem like anybody there was one of them I felt like had a little bit more of an advantage than others in terms of like not having double plays against some of the others. And it's also harder. They play, 2 fewer conference games than they do on the men's side. So you end up with, 2 fewer teams that you can get double plays against. So it does make it feel a little bit a little bit worse, but I also think this is a team that's kind of proven it can compete with anybody and shouldn't necessarily be scared of those games or feel like there's any they can walk into and not be able to win. But yeah, certainly didn't do them any favors from a double play standpoint. Maybe a few favors from a not having game after game after game against the cream of the crop in the league.
Yeah.
And so, Kathy, let's get prediction time. All right. We don't have any music for prediction time, but it's prediction time. Now I'm going to throw it to you. What's IU's overall record and Big Ten conference record?
So overall, I have them at 22-6, and 14-4 in the Big Ten. So I do, as much as I want them to split, I do have them losing against Stanford and Tennessee for non-conference. And then that, on the road against Iowa, Maryland, and Ohio State, I have those 3 for conference losses. And then I just really think that they're going to drop one unexpected that, at least from our perspective, we don't expect them to kind of drop it, maybe at Illinois. I don't know exactly with Maryland. We're hearing some things about Michigan. So maybe there's something with Michigan we're just not aware of. So I do think there's going to be one other conference game. I don't know which one. I do think there's going to be at least one other that we kind of drop. And I thought about actually having us with 5 losses. So, but I went ahead and stuck with 14-4 for conference.
We'll have to go back and revisit these, by the way, at the end of the year. Andy, overall record and Big Ten record.
I will only go back and revisit these if I did well at it. That's usually the tact I take on the assembly call. I only bring stuff up if I feel like I did well on it, and if I didn't, we just pretend it didn't happen. So there's 28 games in total. Is that correct? Is that right? Yeah, I did this on something
18 conference, 10
that I do not have with me right now. So I think I ended up actually with the same record as Kathy, although I got there just slightly differently. I only had 1 non-conference loss. I don't know which one of those they win, but I don't think they lose both of them. And then I had 5 Big Ten losses. I think, there's those few that are really tough. And then it just feels like the league has stepped up in a way that you may drop another game or two that you may not have before. Got players taking different roles. I think there's just going to be a lot more closely contested games than ever before. So kind of netted out in the same place. I was pretty close to 14-4. And then I usually try to tack on an extra loss because I figured I was probably being overly optimistic. And so try to hedge my bets a little bit. So ended up in the same place as you, but one of the losses is a different place than what you had.
Yeah, I'm going to go 23-5. I've got them losing only at Stanford on the road in the non-conference. I think they'll win those 2 down in Fort Myers. And then I have them going 14-4. And I really wanted to go 15-3. In fact, I have them losing at Maryland, at Ohio State, at Iowa. And that's really the ones I feel like that are the ones I'm looking at on paper that I kind of was like, tough games. I think I'd take the loss there. But I kind of agree with you guys. I think there's going to be a game, whether it's at Illinois, at Purdue, at Nebraska, where maybe that, they get, something jumps up and bites them a little bit. So 14-4 in the league. But I really was close to being 15-3 in the league and going 24-4. But I agree with Andy, though. I think the league's just going to be so competitive about, we have the 4 we've kind of talked about, the 5, but I think you could go in, like I said, Nebraska, if they finally play to their potential, and Purdue, you've got 7 teams that are really kind of capable of beating a team on any given night in the Big Ten. Now you get down to the bottom of the league, 11, 12, 13, 14. I think any of those, if you lose any of those 4 teams, I think would be a monumental upset. And that's just a game that can't happen if you want to win the league. So, Andy, so you had to support, we all kind of you went 13-5. Where do you have us finishing in the league?
Now that I did not go through and figure out where everybody else was going to be. So I figure, so I definitely did not go through that exercise. I would guess that would put him maybe in a tie for 3rd. I'm kind of speculating, I think they probably end up about 3rd in the league. I don't know that everybody has the same strength of schedule as what they do, so maybe that's where it gets a little bit off. But I would feel like they'd be right in the mix for 3rd, probably tied for 3rd at that point, because I'm not sure that, if you really look where people were ranked coming in, I just don't know. There's so many teams at the top that are going to beat each other up. And then you got a pretty solid middle, as we talked about. It's I'm not sure anybody's going to end up with just 2-3 losses. So it feels like even if you end up with 5, you're still right there in the mix. So I'll say 3rd-ish without kind of going through all of it.
Kathy?
Yeah, I didn't either, Andy. I didn't go through every other team and guess on their record.
I hope Jeff has a massive spreadsheet where he went through every single Big Ten game and figured out how to play it.
Yeah, he might.
I don't.
He did something similar last year. I don't know if he set it up this year, but I said 14-4, waffled with 13-5, but I still think that's going to be good enough for second. I still am going on the record of thinking Ohio State's going to come away with the regular season title this year. But I do think, people are underplaying how much Iowa lost with, McKenna Warnock and with Monica Sonano. And so I do think that Iowa is going to drop some games that people probably weren't expecting for them. So I think that we end up beating Iowa out for that second spot. And if not, it'll be really close like it was last year too. But I think, it's going to be really tight with those top three, because like you mentioned, those middle teams, I think, are just going to surprise teams from time to time that aren't on, maybe quite aware. The thing with Ohio State, I just think they've returned so much depth and experience. I think they'll be able to withstand that a little better maybe than Iowa and Indiana.
Yeah, I went second, but when I was leaning toward 15-3, I had them tied for first, and that game in Columbus being the tiebreaker, that they'd end up being the 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament because they'd lose in Columbus. But I'm going second, but I wouldn't be shocked if they end up, in a tie for first, because I just think the league, I think 3 losses can get you in the end of that discussion of a tie. If somebody only loses 2, let's say Ohio State only loses 2, IU only loses 2, you're winning the league. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind about that. But I did not make a spreadsheet, but I think we all kind of agree that IU, Iowa, Ohio State are the 3 really at the top and going to be battling for that conference crown, barring something unforeseen injury-wise. But I just think IU's got a little bit more depth than Iowa does. But again, a lot of it plays out with how the schedule is going to go. But I have Ohio State winning the league, and so I have IU as second. So, Kathy, how far does this team go in the NCAA tournament?
I should have an answer right away since I came up with these questions, right? I'm going to actually, I actually thought about this as I was walking the dogs earlier today, and I just can't decide. Like, my heart wants to say Final Four. Like, I really just think that, Final Four is where I want to put them, but I'm actually going to say, Sweet 16, and with the right matchup, I think they can make it to the Elite 8. I'm not sure that we're going to make it to that Final Four run this year that we want to see.
I'm going to go Elite 8, and I think they have a chance to get to the Final Four. But again, it all comes down to matchups and who you get in that regional. But I think they'll be a 1 or a 2 seed, and they'll be hosting in Bloomington, and they'll make it to at least the Elite 8. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the matchup piece makes it a hard question to really know. I'm inclined to say Elite 8. I think by the time the end of the season rolls around, assuming everybody's healthy, you've got a chance to build some of that depth that we feel like is better than what it's been in recent years, and you can kind of see it a little bit at that point. I do think they're going to be in reasonably good shape. And so even if they end up as a, 2 or 3 seed, I think they're going to be, hopefully operating at a high level at that point. So I'm going to say Elite 8. Would love to, be able to watch them for a month and then, figure out whether, where are they at early in the season versus what's the amount of growth that you can get is, goes a long way. I certainly think from a talent standpoint, they have plenty to make it to a Final Four, even with losing Grace. And I think the experience of having to deal with playing without her last year is going to pay dividends this year. But yeah, hard to kind of figure out, what to predict without seeing. Hopefully the matchups shake out, maybe better than they did in the past. But I'll say Elite 8.
All right, Andy, I'm going to throw it right back to you. Who finishes second? Assuming McKenzie leads the team in scoring, who's second?
I'm going to say Sydney Parrish. She, really wasn't that far on a points per game basis behind Grace last year. A little bit weird to think about that, given the time that Grace missed, and even when they were trying to ease her back in a little bit. But just think she's somebody who seems like all the offseason buzz has been really good. Apparently played well in the secret scrimmage. And for me, it was either her or Yarden, and I went with her. Just think she could score a lot of different ways. Is going to have the ball in her hands a decent amount, got lots of opportunities to score last year and took advantage of it. And if she can keep some of the foul trouble in check, like we talked about earlier, she's on the floor that much more and can be the one to do it. But I think you're going to have a number of double-digit scorers and probably a lot of good candidates for second leading scorer, which is a good problem to have.
Yes.
I would say as we head into the season.
Kathy?
Yep, I agree. I have Sydney as well in that second slot. And I don't think she'll be too terribly far behind Mackenzie actually in scoring. I do think, as much as we talked about her foul trouble, I do think, she's about a year now into Coach Morin's defensive scheme. I think she's going to learn to control that a little better on the fouling side, and she'll stay out there on the floor. So I definitely am predicting Sydney will ramp up in her minutes, which means she's going to ramp up in her points as well. And I think she'll be right behind Mackenzie in scoring.
Yeah, I will go with that as well. But I think it's going to be an interesting battle throughout the season. I think Sarah, Sydney, and Yarden are going to be right there kind of together. But I think it'll shake out in the end that Sydney will be the second leading scorer on the team. The next one, will Mackenzie pass Tyra Bustle on the all-time scoring list? I'm going to go first and say yes. Kathy?
Yep, I think we covered that too. I agree. I think she gets her.
Andy?
Yep, I think so too. Even if they limit the minutes early, I think she's efficient enough to score in the non-conference games. And I think by the time you throw in at least a couple Big Ten tournament games, hopefully a few NCAA tournament games, then I think she's in good shape.
And then our last prediction of the night, who's the first player off the bench? Kathy?
Gosh, we talked a lot about who we think will be the first two, but now we have to take a stand, right? Is it Lily? Is it Lexi? I am going to go with Lily. Yeah, maybe Jules sneaks in there too. You never know. But I'm actually going to go with Lily. I think that we're going to see her coming in for Mackenzie earlier and more often than we did last year, just to, again, try to rest that knee of Mackenzie and not risk injury. So I'm going to go with Lily will, on average, come off the bench first more often than not.
Andy?
Kathy stole my pick and my reasoning, so I won't add anything else. I had the same thought process of if the likelihood is they're going to manage her minutes and try to be careful with her, and Lily's made the progress that everybody has, kind of hoped for and talked about over the offseason, then I think she feels like the one that would come in. But I think either of those two is a possibility.
Yeah, if we're kind of going with who reports to the scores bench first every game more often as that first person off the bench, then I agree. I think Lily will be that person. I think they'll try and get Mac out maybe right there around that first TV timeout, and then maybe play, and go from there. But I would not be surprised though to see somebody like Jules work her way into maybe being that person who gets the most minutes off the bench. And again, we don't know enough from the secret scrimmage. May have been an outlier and maybe she won't, but I'm really getting intrigued by what she can bring to the team just with her skill set. And the fact that Coach Morin seems to trust her already to put her out there, at least in the scrimmage, to go against a Division I team as well. So we'll have to wait and see. Those are our predictions for the season. We're going to kind of come back. Hopefully we'll remember to come back and revisit these at the end of the year and see how we did with them. But yeah, so as we wind it up here, Kathy?
Yeah. So overall, I would just say my kind of thoughts going into this is I'm excited, right? I mean, I was excited before, and then we started talking about other teams and we talk about the schedule. And now we've taken a deep dive into our own team, which we were already excited about, but it just, it reminds me of all those great memories we had from last year, right? Like, ignore the Miami game at the end. That was not their season. The whole season was such a joy to watch that team. And to be honest, I fully expect that we'll have that kind of joy from this team as well this year. So can't wait already. November 1st, having that first exhibition game on Big Ten Plus. So if you got it for Hoosier Syria, make sure you keep it around actually through February, because the women still play on Big Ten Plus on a February 11th against Purdue at home, of all games they put on Big Ten Plus. So yeah. That's neat. But regardless of what, our TV schedule looks like, I think this team is going to give everyone a lot of joy for us to watch again this year.
Andy, final thoughts?
Yeah, just really excited for the season to get started. I think it's not too often that you can lose a generational player and still have really high hopes for the season following. And I think, again, to go back to some of the stuff we talked about with just where the program is, that's something else. Grace will be sorely missed without a doubt, but a lot of interesting storylines with the team to figure out who steps up to fill in for that. A really solid conference that they're going to be playing in with lots of good matchups, and looking forward to seeing how they build on the success of the last few years and watching them and hopefully getting the answers to some of these questions through the early parts of the season and be able to figure out what kind of roles the newcomers are going to be able to play how, Lily and Lexi look in expanded roles. And then, a pretty solid starting five that you feel good about, and just trying to figure out how can you fill in around them with people who can help pick up the slack when they have an off night or get in foul trouble or whatever the case may be. But a really exciting season on the horizon for sure, and looking forward to watching it get started. And certainly appreciate you guys having me on to talk about it. I'll be sure to join you. Kathy already told me when she was here visiting that I'm the designated backup for when there's games that you guys already know you're going to miss. So I'll do my best to be available. It's a fun team to talk about always, and fun team to watch. That's what I always walk away from watching. It was like, they're just fun to watch. And so looking forward to seeing more of the same this year.
Appreciate that, Andy.
Yep. Awesome.
And as Kathy already mentioned, coming up next, the IU women will be in action next Wednesday when they host Northwood in an exhibition game, November 1st, 7 Eastern, 6 Central. And Kathy and I will be on after that game. It will not be a full post game, just kind of a brief wrap up of that game, and kind of to have our normal show next week on Wednesday the 1st. So that will be on after that game concludes on BTN Plus. Their first official game is November the 9th, which I believe is a Thursday. That game will be against Eastern Illinois, 7 Eastern, 6 Central, and again on BTN Plus. Our next episode again will be next Wednesday after that game against Northwood, the exhibition game. Assembly Call will be on this Thursday with their normal weekly show. Andy, you on this week?
I am. I would assume the plan is going to be to do Jay's over unders if I was a betting man, but I have not seen them to prepare.
What's your over under on that?
That was really not planned at all, I swear. But so no, I think usually it's about that time. The first exhibition game is on Sunday, so I feel like we usually try to do that prior to being able to see anything. So I'm gonna assume that's what we're doing, but I am planning to be on regardless of what the topic is.
Okay. Also want to remind people that, or let people know that are listening to the podcast or maybe didn't see the Twitter feeds today. The YouTube channel is no longer Assembly Calls channel. It is the Back Home Network channel, where you can find not only our stuff doing the work and Assembly Call, but also Crimson Cast material as well. And also Crimson Cast has a women's basketball podcast with our friend Amanda Foster. We encourage you to check out those shows as well. If you want to see us do the show live and be a part of our live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ I guess we should update this. I believe it's now Back Home Network, but I'll have to double check on that. You can be a part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.com community and .com/community. Special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing our logos. Also a big thank you to Bob Thompson for our music that you've heard throughout the broadcast. And thank you to you, and thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you soon. I want to thank my co-host Kathy Amos and our guest Andy Bottoms for being with us tonight. Thank all of you who were in the Workaholics tonight on the live YouTube feed. We'll talk to you again in a couple weeks. Until then, or until next week. Until then, keep your elbow in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Awesome. Well, Andy, thanks so much. That was fun.
Yes.
Hey,
it was a lot of fun.
Happy to do it.
So we'll let you go. We kept you a little longer than normal, but it was such a good discussion. I didn't realize we were past an hour, and I looked up and like, oh man.
Whoops.
No, you're good. I was like, man, this will probably be less than our normal like Thursday nights where you go an hour and a half. I might be the problem. Who's to say? So we don't know. Common thread between the two is me at this point. So
I don't know. Jeff and I have had marathon shows, just the two of us. So I know we've had some post-game shows where it's just the two of us and we go over an hour. So
all right. Well, then
we can get pretty windy.
So, Andy, appreciate you being with us tonight.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
See ya.
Bye-bye, everyone.
See you, Kathy. All right. So